فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما.
Hey everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Islamic Mary podcast. So for today, I want to speak about a question I've been getting as the book has come out. As you know, the Islamic Mary has been out for 2 months. And as I go and I speak different places, I love to engage the audience and hear what's on their mind, questions about faith and spirituality, and how they are perceiving the book. And one of the questions that keeps coming is, how is your book different, right? There are other books on Mary, especially the Christian Mary, and there are other books on the Islamic Mary, or the Quranic one. So today I want to go ahead and speak about some of the books that have come out in the last 10 years on Mary, or Maryam, and then speak about how my book is a contribution to the field. So the first one is by Husn Aboud, and it's called Mary and the Quran, a literary reading in the Routledge Studies in the Quran. And this is an important book because it provides analysis of the complete story of Mary in its liturgical and narrative rhetorical context. And this is a literary reading, is a prerequisite to any textual reading of the Quran, whether juristic, theological, or otherwise. It also is intertextual between the Old Testament, New Testament, and the Quran. And the Quran, it argues, is an oral event, linguistic phenomenon, and great literature. So the application of modern literary theories is essential to have for full comprehension of the history of the development of literary forms from pre-Islamic periods, such as poetry, storytelling, speech giving, to the present. In addition, there is a need from a feminist perspective. So this is something new from Husn Aboud, that she identifies herself as a feminist and trying to look at the Quran and the Islamic tradition to find proto-feminists, people who were advocating pro-women positions in the medieval or classical times. And this book tries to understand the depth of why a Christian mother figure such as Mary was important in early Islam, and the different stages of the development of the Quran as a communication process between Muhammad and the early Muslim community. It also focused on modern literary theories, gender perspective, and feminist criticism in Quranic scholarship for the first time. This book will be and is an invaluable resource for scholars and researchers of Islamic studies, Quranic and New Testament studies, and comparative literature and feminist theology. So I think this is a really important book, and the book that was foundational for me, that when I was looking at different Quranic and biblical figures, I saw this one that came out in 2015, and it started making me think about Mary in the Quran and her important perspective. Also, as that description mentions, there's a focus on literature. So how does Maryam appear in the Quran in terms of a literary perspective? For instance, how is she used? How is the Surat Maryam discuss her? And how is Maryam compared to other biblical and Quranic figures? Also, this book has, in my view, been overlooked. So there are a lot of books on Mary and a couple on the Islamic Mary or the Quranic Mary. But because maybe this book is in the Routledge series and the Quran is very academic, and also because maybe the author is Arab, or because it comes from a very Quranic perspective, it hasn't got as much attention as I believe it should. So her work has also been important, Husn Aboud, because she is someone who is a feminist and self-admitted feminist, and she has talked about using Mary as part of Islamic feminism or Muslim feminist understanding of the text. And in my book, I actually discussed Husn Aboud. She made me think more critically about the idea of Maryam being a prophet, and also thinking about the idea of feminism and how it fits within Islamic tradition. All right, so that's book number 1. Let's go to book number 2, which is called Christians, Muslims, and Mary, A History by Rita George Teveridge. And the description here describes the book as moving through history. Views of Mary's role in Christian-Muslim relations have constantly shifted back and forth from bridge to barrier and back again. This book focuses on history and use sometimes polemical, sometimes more positive, of Mary as either a bridge or barrier between Islam and Christianity, is not a comparative theology of Mary in both traditions. Rather, focuses on Mary has functioned within Christian theology of Islam over time, and to a lesser degree in Islamic theology of Christianity. So a couple of important points right there. So in comparison to Hussein Aboud, Rita George Teveridge, he is more interested in history and the history of Christian-Muslim relations, but primarily in terms of the history of Mary within Christian theology of Islam. So this is not necessarily coming from a Muslim or Islamic perspective, but coming from an important Christian one. And as she notes, or as the description describes, it's not comparative theology. And we'll put a pause there, a footnote, because we'll come back to that, because other books are comparative theology, where you have a Muslim or Christian author and theologian discussing the role of Mary within their traditions. This book begins with a comparison of biblical and Quranic accounts of Mary. The author walks the reader through these texts with some attention given to extra scriptural sources, hadith, Christian tradition. Subsequent chapters highlight key texts, theologians from various time periods, mostly Christian, but some Muslims, who discuss Mary in light of the other, ending with a consideration of Nosra Atate's groundbreaking theology of Islam. So once again, this book has also been foundational. I got a chance to speak with Rita George Teveridge at a lectureship series here in Washington, D.C. And engaging with her work, I was really fascinated with the use of Mary, how she's a bridge or a barrier. And then I actually wrote a review on Rita George Teveridge's book, and that actually made me think more about Mary in Islam, and then it actually encouraged me to write the book, The Islamic Mary. And what's so fascinating about this book is the role of Mary within Christian history and theology, and how Christians have used Mary either to build a bridge, like such as in Nosra Atate, the groundbreaking document, which we're celebrating 60 years now. And this document mentions Mary and mentions that Muslims are devoted to Mary. Sometimes they venerate her, they call out to her. And this idea of Mary being a bridge was really formative to me, because growing up post 9/11, I was always thinking about Abraham or Ibrahim as that bridge in Abrahamic religions. Also, what's really fascinating about this book, and one of the things I love, is the art history. So Rita George Teveridge, she does a great job of using images and art, and she has like art historian background of sorts. So that really emerges from her book. So let's move to the last book here, which is called Mary in the Quran, Friend of God, Virgin Mother, and it's part of an interfaith series. And this is a book that recently came out and translated, and is by Mona Tatari and Klaus von Stosch. And this is a book which is a sensitive consideration of Mary, Mother of Jesus, in the Quran. An entire chapter, surah, is dedicated to her, and she's the only woman mentioned by name in the Quran. Indeed, her name appears more frequently than that of either Muhammad or Jesus. From the earliest times to the present day, Mary, the mother of Jesus, continues to be held in high regard by Christians and Muslims alike. Yet she has been the cause of much tension between these two religions. So this interesting description here discusses the important role of Mary and how Mary is mentioned 34 times in the Quran. And when I go out and speak about Mary, the Islamic Mary, I always mention that, and people are surprised that she's mentioned more times in the Quran than in the New Testament. And even in the Quran itself, there is more mentions of Mary and Maryam than other figures of import, such as Jesus. So from the earliest times that she's held by high regard, right? And we see that by Christians and Muslims, but she's also a source of tension, as Rita George Teveridge mentions. In this groundbreaking study, Mona Tatari and Klaus von Stosch painstakingly reconstruct the picture of Mary that is presented in the Quran and show how veneration of the Blessed Virgin Mary in the Roman Catholic Church intersects and interacts with the testimony of the Quran. This sensitive and scholarly treatise offers a significant contribution to contemporary interfaith dialogue. So this book is unique because it is written by European authors. So oftentimes us as Americans, we focus on what's written in English and focus on other North American or US centric work. But here, this is one that is written from those in Europe, and it talks about Mary in a comparative theological perspective. So it once again focuses on the Quran. So that's a theme that we see with the other works such as Husn Abud and Rita George Tivrich, that there's this focus on comparing her in between the Bible and the Quran. But this is a unique book because both these authors come from different religious traditions, one Muslim and one Christian and Catholic. And in their different perspectives, they come and they share different ideas about Mary. And this is unique and foundational also for me because you see a Christian and Catholic scholar really engaging the Quranic Mary and how it makes him realize the importance of Mary within his own tradition and wanting to revive that history and spirit. And also you see Mona, the Muslim author. She is someone who engages in the Quranic Mary, but also through her relationship with her Catholic and Christian interlocutor and counterpart, she also gains a greater appreciation of Mary. Also, the other female figures such as Eve, Hawa, and then rediscovers and develops this fascination with the idea of love in the Quran and the Islamic tradition, and how that may be a source of a bridge to Christianity. So in conclusion, we see there are different approaches here in these last three books that have come out in the last 10 years. The first one is more of a literary one, a Quranic studies, trying to understand Quran, understand Mary within the Quranic tradition. Also has a feminist perspective, very women-centric, trying to emphasize gender equality and how Mary could be a means for contemporary Muslim women and even Christian women to find equality within their traditions. Then we move to a more theological history book. So instead of just a literary and focus on Quranic studies, we have a history of Mary in Christian-Muslim relations, primarily within Christian theology, but also a little bit within Islamic theology, and emphasis on art history and how the various images represent opportunities, bridges, and barriers between Christians and Muslims. Also a focus on interreligious dialogue, especially highlighting Nosir Atate and its role in trying to build better relationships with Christians and Muslims. And then lastly, we see a book more focused on comparative theology. So two different theologians coming together from different backgrounds, examining a particular character, Mary in the Quran, Maryam, and then reflecting at the end and saying, okay, how did this exercise really enhance our own understanding of faith, of theology, and our own religious traditions? So these are the different books that have come out. And I would say that my book is different or contributes to these three wonderful works in a sense that it's trying to understand Mary not just within the Quran or within a particular historical tradition, but rather try to understand her throughout. So try to understand Maryam through the Quran, the prophetic tradition, mysticism, theology, art and film, and then contemporary interfaith relations. So my work wanted to see the entire Islamic tradition, not just through an Abrahamic framework or a five pillars approach, but also understand Islam through a Marian approach or through Maryam. So how do you understand theology different when you look through the prism of Mary or Maryam, or that of mysticism, or even art and architecture? So I was trying to not limit myself to the Quran. Of course, the Quran is foundational, and that's part of my training in Quranic studies. But how does the Quran influence the prophetic tradition and theology and mysticism and art? And how can we understand the Islamic tradition to be an exegesis or commentary on the Quran? So I was really fascinated with the different ways Maryam appears and reemerges in different contexts, and I want to highlight that within the book. So thanks once again for listening to the Islamic Mary podcast. I would encourage you to order my book, which is has been out for 2 months now. I'm happy to see there's some reviews on Amazon. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast. This podcast is available on all major podcasting services such as Spotify and Apple. Also encourage your friends, students, and colleagues to listen to this podcast. So as I've been speaking in different places, I've been sharing the podcast with folks and seeing that people are listening to the podcast before some of the talks or reading groups. Also encourage you to review this podcast. It helps people find it and learn more about it. And you can visit my website where you can read some of the blogs I've written on the Islamic Mary and biblical and Quranic figures, as well as join my newsletter to learn more about my research and be up to date regarding the Islamic Mary, the publication, and its various presentations. Thanks once again, and take care.